1. This all happened to me when I was 17. I've always wanted answers, but I've always been too afraid to go looking, so any suggestions or theories would be much appreciated. I live in Melbourne, Australia, and one of the most well-known haunted locations here is Lorndale Mental Asylum. Lorndale was a mental asylum in 1953 and closed in the 90s. The standard stories of physical and sexual abuse the patients faced around that time period are no different here. Having always had an incredible love and curiosity for the paranormal, and always wanting to visit the asylum, I never even hesitated when I was given the opportunity from an ex, who lived around the corner at the time. He had been several times and knew the area and happily offered to take me around one night. We ended up going just before sunset first, to have a suss of the area in light and, quite honestly, to see if I was ballsy enough to come back after dark. Back then, I was definitely in touch with my spiritual side, and had never properly looked into it all, and stupidly went into the place with no form of protection, leaving myself wide open and vulnerable to anything that was waiting for me. I also have a large history of severe mental illness, which I believe made me an even bigger target in such a place. I'll try my best to keep the story as short as possible, without missing anything, but it is a fairly long story, so bear with me here. We walked around some of the outside buildings for a while, heard a few voices, but nothing major. Before we went into the main building, I found myself stuck staring into one of the windows. I couldn't see anything, but I knew someone was there. Someone was there. It knew I was there. It knew I knew that it was there, and it wanted to play with me. So, as classic dumb white teenage horror movie characters do, we went inside. I only lasted maybe 2 minutes in the building before I knew I had to get the fuck out. I bolted out the door and completely off the property before I stopped and waited for my ex, Damon, to catch up. We decided enough was enough and time to go home. On the way, we stopped just down the road, still with the buildings in sight, to sit down and have a smoke and say a blessing. Halfway through the blessing, I started feeling a strange pressure in that soft spot, the back of your neck and skull, as if something was pushing against me. My vision went strange, very foggy, but also as if I was seeing everything through a screen. I felt myself being pushed into the back of my brain, and something else taking over. If I was with anyone but Damon, I probably would have never said anything, but I knew he would believe me, so in a panic I tried to explain. There was a lake further down the road. He almost had to carry me down there and had one hell of a time calming me down. Once there, he said another blessing using all of the elements, and I continuously told whatever was attacking me that it was not welcome. It's hard to describe exactly how I felt at this stage. I felt so disconnected from my body and mind. I was still there, but I could feel the part of my mind that was myself being pushed into the back of my being, and something else trying to take over. The whole thing maybe lasted about 5 minutes before the second blessing was made and the presence left, but I had never been so goddamn terrified in my life. And to this day, even after a near-death experience, still never have. Everything seemed normal again after it left. We went back to Damon's house, had some dinner, and watched TV, etc., etc., before going to bed. He passed out straight away, but I found myself awake for hours. I was seeing faces in the dark, creepy, scary faces. Sometime during the night, something in me told me that I needed to go back. To the point I actually got out of bed and was standing in the doorway before I forced myself to not be a fucking idiot and to not wander off there alone in the middle of the night. I felt a bit odd the next day. Something just seemed wrong. I wasn't quite myself, and everything was slightly sinister. I brushed it off as just being weirded out over everything that had happened. Fast forward about 2 or 3 weeks, and I was an absolute mess. I was severely depressed. Couldn't bring myself to get out of bed and on the verge of killing myself every day. I didn't go to uni for a week. And if I did go, I left within hours because I found I couldn't be around other people. All of these feelings and emotions I was used to, having suffered from severe depression since I was 12. But I had been so well and happy for almost a year by that stage, I couldn't work out what was wrong. It took me a while, but I started to notice that these emotions weren't mine. I had no reason to feel this way. Everything felt like it was being pushed upon me by an outside force. I called Damien as soon as I clicked onto this and explained to him. I hadn't spoken to him since the night. And he agreed straight away that whatever attacked me had followed me home. I concluded that since I had that history of depression and suicidal tendencies there, it chose to attack me in that way because I could have so easily never noticed that it wasn't myself feeling these things. The next day, Damien took me to a store in the city that specializes in crystal healing, psychic readings, and the likes. After explaining to one of the ladies, she gave me my first crystal, a tektite, to ward off the entity. As soon as I walked outside and put the crystal around my neck, in the exact same place I felt the pressure of it entering against my skull, I felt it leave again. Within 5 minutes, I was completely back to my normal self again. I never took that crystal off for the next year and a half. I would sleep with it on, even showered with it half of the time. If I didn't have it on, I found myself incredibly anxious and vulnerable. I eventually lost it, but that happened at a time where I realized I no longer needed it. I had other forces keeping me safe by then, and it was a relief to be able to finally let that part of my life go. I always wanted to go back to Laurendale and face my demon head on, with a lot more protection this time, to find out what it wanted from me and why it attacked me so harshly. I have no connections to the place, no family members who were patients, nothing. One day, about 6 months later though, I got a message from Damon. He told me something urged him to stop inside on his way home, and as he was standing there, he heard a voice telling him to bring Sarah back. Since that, I decided I will never ever return. I refuse to even go near the suburb now. Sorry for the story being so long. I'm good at rambling, but I didn't want to leave anything out, so thank you so much if you bothered reading everything. This isn't a story I tell people with a light heart, and certainly not to just anyone, but I'm very glad I now have a community I can openly discuss it with. 2. I believe certain people are more sensitive to the supernatural than others. I do not believe I am one of these people. My girlfriend, on the other hand, has told me before of experiences seeing shadow people, so I think she could be more sensitive than I am. Before the experience I will describe below, I've never seen anything I thought was a ghost or anything like that. This is the story of the only thing I know that I saw. So my girlfriend and I were watching a movie. I don't remember what, but I know it was not a horror movie or anything of the sort. She lived in a small apartment. You walk into the living room, and straight ahead there is a short hallway, with an immediate left in the hallway that led to the kitchen. A step past the kitchen was the bathroom on the right, and the bedroom was just beyond it at the end of the short hallway. Directly to the right of the door against the wall was the couch. And we just had the TV in the middle of the living room on a little stand. As we were watching the movie, to the right, standing where the hallway and the living room meet, I saw a woman out of the corner of my eye. She stood there for a few seconds before I turned my head to look at her. When I looked, she was gone. This was in my periphery, but not totally on the side of my vision. I could see her well enough to make out hair color and details of the dress she was wearing. I brushed it off, thinking to myself, and just turned my head back to the TV. My girlfriend says, "You saw her too?" Immediately my heart rate increased. Instead of just saying yes, I wanted to make sure we saw the same thing, so I said, "So what?" She replied, "The woman." Again, I didn't want to give details to her so she could corroborate what I saw. I asked, what was she wearing and what did she look like? She told me, white dress, blonde hair, cut just above her shoulders. I've seen her before. After this, she detailed the dress to me a little as well. At this point, I'm like, okay, what the fuck, because that is exactly what she looked like. So I asked more about it, and she just told me that she had seen her once before, and didn't think she meant any harm. I moved in a while later, and I could always feel a pressure near the bathroom, kind of in the corner between the bathroom and the bedroom doors. I always felt so uncomfortable due to this pressure I felt. It was like the air was thick. Detail for later, the door to the bedroom would always slowly shut itself if we left it open at night, which we just attributed to the airflow of the apartment. Eventually my girlfriend had a bad nightmare where she awoke in the dream and heard me calling for help in the living room. As she tried to go in there, she was pulled into the bathroom by multiple, more than 2, black shadowy arms, and was held there as the bathroom door shut. I woke her up at this point because she was making noises like she was terrified in her sleep. Anyway, she told me she knew the thing that pulled her in the bathroom was the woman. I don't know why she thinks that. It's just what she said. She would always joke with me after I moved in about the woman, and I just told her she better not try to talk to her. Here is the end of the story. I am a Christian, and what I believe is that I am saved and therefore have the Holy Spirit inside of me. The Bible tells us we have power through the Holy Spirit over what I was considering this to be an evil spirit. So one day when she was gone, I prayed something along these lines. God, regardless of the intent of this spirit or entity, it is making me uncomfortable and feel unsafe. I pray that through the power of the Holy Spirit you remove it from this place. Cheesy sounding, I know, but I didn't know what to say. Immediately, the pressure I felt was gone. I decided not to say anything to my girlfriend to see if she noticed that the woman was gone. After about 2 weeks, she told me out of the blue, "You know, I don't think the woman is here anymore." I told her about my prayer, and she just kind of shrugged and said, "Yeah, I think it worked. She's gone. I know some of you may be put off by the Christian part or whatever, but that is my story. Oh, and that door never shut itself again." 3. This is my second time posting on Reddit, and I've been holding this back for a long time because I'm worried it'll make people question my mental health. I've told maybe 2 people, and each time it makes me question if I'd done the right thing in both telling them and my actions at the time. I have to say there is no history of mental illnesses in my family before I go on. Also, this might be kind of long, so please get comfortable. This happened when I was in middle school, at about 14, and 2 years after our big move from South Florida to northern Arizona. My mom and stepdad had 2 kids, my sister, around 4 years old, and baby brother, a few months old. We had moved into this suburban neighborhood, a 1-story townhouse in a cul-de-sac, right on the corner of the street. It was a nice neighborhood, full of families and the like. I had my own room, and we were closer to town, so visiting friends was a lot easier, and that made me like it a lot. The main downfall was my parents owned a business and needed me to babysit basically all the time. Every day after school I came home and then my mom would leave to go help Dad out at the shop until 12 to sometimes 2 a.m. On the weekends I was able to hang with friends or have them come over, so I wasn't completely isolated from a social life, which was nice, but hardly felt like enough. We were settled into this house for, I want to say, a couple months. It was probably made around the 70s, given the style choice of the layout and overall appearance. All the bedrooms and bathroom were down one long hallway, and the living room was one large area that had a random step down into it. Anyways, I'll get on with the events that happened. Like every typical day, I got home, settled in, got an update on the kids from my mom, and she left to go help Dad. I would fix Daisy and I dinner, play with Drake, yada yada yada, all that babysitting stuff I'm sure we're all familiar with. As the sun went down, I got Drake ready for bed and put him in his crib. He settled easily enough with a bottle, and then I'd go fix Daisy's sippy cup, so she has one less excuse to venture in and out of her room while I attempted homework. My little sister Daisy and I had our own rooms, and my brother slept in a crib in my parents' room. I left him in there and went to the kitchen to get her juice. While I walked back down the long hallway, hers is at the end, I heard her talking. That's nothing strange, as she's a chatterbox. But the particular things she's saying make me stop and listen. I stopped right there before her doorway and leaned onto the wall. Yes, we live here. That's my sister, Tori. No, she's in big kid school. Her room is next to mine. I can remember my heart dropping to my stomach. Those answers are way too specific. Who would she even be talking to? There's a window in her room, and thinking a creep might be up against our house talking to her, I immediately walked in and looked around. She was sitting on the floor, looking up at the ceiling, wall area above her TV. The window was shut behind her, and she was alone. The TV was playing some cartoon with the volume really low, and her bed had drawers underneath, so no one could have hidden under it. She also didn't have a closet. We were alone in the room, but her one-sided conversation still had me unnerved. So I asked her, Daisy, who are you talking to? I can still recall the look on her face and the conversation vividly, like she was confused by my question. The man? What man? And she pointed to him. But there was no one there. And even if there was, they'd either be incredibly tall or sideways, since it was where the wall met the ceiling. The man on the wall. Daisy, there's no one there. Her little cheeks puffed up, and she got mad at me. Yes, he is. He's right there. At the time, I didn't want to seem scared, and I know imaginary friends happened around her age. Hell, even my mom said I had some. But the information she was giving didn't sit well with me. Everything just felt off. I told her to get into bed, handed her her sippy cup, and put in a movie for her before saying goodnight and retreating to the living room. That was the night I started seeing a shadow man. I'd sit in the living room, and he stood to the entrance of the long hallway, on top of the step, and just stare. I rarely ever saw him head on. It was mostly through my peripherals, but I could swear he had yellow eyes. Ever since my sister spoke to this thing, weird stuff started to happen. Like late at night, the kitchen cupboards and drawers would open and slam. Their toys would randomly light up and sing, foreign smells and dropping temperatures. I always felt like I was being watched, and even my dad started seeing things. Him and I both agreed the house was definitely active, but my mom just ignored us. Lucky for them, they were never around as much to experience these things. I thought I was going crazy. I told Daisy not to talk to it anymore, that we don't know them and could be bad. Still, it only got worse. I told some of my friends about it and even invited a few over to spend the night and check it out for themselves. Nothing major happened, but they also felt like someone was watching them, particularly from the hallway entrance. Soon, I had less friends come over. I had began feeling stuck in a creepy house, trying to take care of and protect 2 children. And then with the pressures of school and a dropping social life, I regret to say I started cutting. I wanted to talk more about this thing, but I was scared to be labelled crazy and written off, or worse. unfit to take care of my brother and sister, and seen as either a pity case or inept. But that wasn't the worst of it. The moment I originally wanted to talk about the most from this time is when I was watching the kids and I heard a voice. But I didn't hear in my ear or in the air. It was coming from inside my head. It was a young man's voice. Being a female, this was more than startling. In that moment, I believed I officially cracked. Like the left and right side of my brain were tectonic plates. They finally scraped so hard together, it caused an earthquake of irreversible damage. I was no longer a sane person who thought crazy things were happening to them. I was the crazy one. I was the problem. This was all my fault because I let everything get the best of me. The more I panicked, the louder the voice got, telling me to calm down and everything will be okay, but it only made me more scared. The unknown thing inside me was just making things worse. I might have had a panic attack. The one place I thought I was completely alone and safe, my mind, has been invaded by a stranger. He was trying to tell me something, but I wouldn't have it. It was probably a good thing I was home alone because I started screaming for him to leave, mentally and physically. I remember crumpling to the floor, begging for them to go away, crying and collapsing in on myself. After what felt like forever, they promised to go, but that they would come back. I'm not a religious person, but I prayed they didn't. But praying has never worked for me. A few days later, arriving home from school, the voice came back in a whisper. I mentally screamed, telling him to leave and that this wasn't his place. He never made it seem like it was, though. If anything, his voice sounded apologetic and sincere. Still, I tried willing him away to the point of running to the bathroom and self-inflicting. My mind quieted after that. The main thing he said was, "Let me tell you my name." But I wouldn't let him. I kept interrupting him or mentally screaming, just anything to try and make it leave. The thing that did stop him speaking was my threat to cut. It got quiet again after that. And for a while I thought I was safe. I don't know how long these occurrences were from each other. The main one that I can recall the best was the last time it spoke to me. I was babysitting once again, around the time I was supposed to be putting the kids to sleep. Drake was in his crib, and Daisy was in her room. I was walking back from tucking Daisy in when I heard him say, "Hey," as if he knew, like he was watching me and knew I was free to chat. The kids were asleep, my parents were gone, and I was left wide open. My heart stopped and I ceased walking, begging myself that this wasn't going to be happening now. Not again. Fucking please don't. Let me tell you my name. That's all I want to do. Let me say my name and I won't ever talk to you again. I promise. I promise. Just let me tell you my name. He was pleading inside my head. The thing was, he wouldn't say his name outright. It was like I had to grant him permission to utter his name. Almost like a vampire can't come inside unless you invite him in kind of thing. It was bizarre, and I wanted none of it. I tried to will him away like I had before, but he wasn't having any of my shit either. I threatened to cut myself again, but he still asked to let him say his name, as if it would clear something up. But even if he was someone I knew, how can I be sure he was telling the truth? I don't think I could believe him anyways, because his voice was unrecognizable. I ended up on the floor sobbing again, digging my nails into my arms and begging him to shut up and leave. In the end, I told him I don't ever want to know his name and to leave. Just go away and never talk to me again. Reflecting on it now, he sounded hurt, and very disappointed, and one last time said, "Please, at least, let me tell you my name." And I still told him, no. After that, the voice never came back. I never heard it in or outside my head again. The paranormal activity escalated, and we moved many times afterwards. But the shadow kept following me. In high school, I had to live with a friend for a year, and it got physical, trashing my room, tugging my feet while I was sleeping, scaring the animals in the house, and even messing with my electronics. In college, I was even bitten, but that's another story. I don't know what to think about it all, though. Like, was that voice from a spirit or someone trying to help? Was it wrong of me to push it away? It didn't seem harmful, but having a voice in my head that wasn't mine freaked me out way too much. But then again, there is scenario of evil spirits disguising themselves as harmless things. So, did I make the right choice? Did I prevent an even worse case scenario? I don't think I have a mental illness because, if it were one, it would be more of a recurring thing, right? Has anyone else had an experience or knowledge of something similar? It has been bugging me for years. Also, I stopped self-harming shortly after that. I had a friend help me through it, and went to a counsellor. I only told my one friend about the voice, though. She recently passed away, so no one close really knows about the voice. I have an update. I witnessed a friend have a series of panic attacks and didn't know what to do. We were pretty recently made friends, and so I wasn't sure how familiar I could be with them. The only thing I could think of with being in their shoes was when the voice invaded my head. It was a huge risk, but I told him I used to have the same sort of thing, only it came with a voice in my head. It took a moment, and I thought I'd definitely fucked up with telling them. But instead, they asked me something I almost couldn't believe. He asked me if they told me their name. I still can't believe that was the first thing he asked. It opened up the conversation, and they had the same experience, only they let the name introduce himself. With that outcome, he's been hearing the voice since, and it hasn't been saying nice things. It actually sparks some of the panic attacks. But he doesn't see shadow people or spirits like I do, so it's not necessarily a win or lose. We're both affected, but in different ways. 4. From June 2013 to June 2015, I lived in an apartment with my husband and 2 sons, having moved back to my hometown for a new job. Not long after we moved in, I started to experience some strange things. First, I'd hear random noises in the apartment, when either no one was home or no one else was awake, items falling, cabinets banging, etc. I didn't think much of these experiences, as I thought it was our cat or maybe our kids piled their toys in their closet and perhaps things had fallen over. However, soon I began to experience something bumping into or shaking the bed, all while I was awake. I'd been laying there listening to music in my headphones or watching videos on my phone before going to sleep when it would happen. I couldn't come up with a rational explanation, but tried to ignore it. Then one night I was watching a video and felt my cat jump on the bed and walk towards me, which wasn't unusual as he often slept with me and typically demanded attention. I absent-mindedly reached out to pet him, but he wasn't there. I looked away from my phone expecting to see him in another spot on the bed, but he was nowhere. No, he's not a dainty cat. He's a 20-pound fat cat. When he jumps on a bed, you can certainly feel it, and when he jumps off, you can hear him land. I had clearly felt him, or rather felt something, jump onto and walk up the bed. I had not heard him jump off. I was now seriously freaked out again, tried to ignore it. This experience became an almost nightly event. Jump on the bed, walk around, sometimes even touch me. If my eyes were closed, I'd keep up to see if it was my cat. And I could catch him, but it never was. I'd even go look for him and find him in another room. I didn't tell my husband for fear of sounding stupid, crazy. Then one day, my husband asked me if he could tell me about something without me making fun of him. I say, yes, of course. He then tells me that he often feels something jump on the bed and walk around, like a cat, when he is trying to sleep. Yet he always locks the cat out of the bedroom. He worked nights at the time, and slept during the day while I had a normal schedule. I was shocked, but also relieved that it wasn't just happening to me. This went on the whole time we lived there. We debated setting up a camera to see if we'd capture anything, but in the end decided we didn't want to see what may be there. We are now living in a house we bought in June 2015, and the activity stopped completely. Until about 2 weeks ago. The ghost creature is back, and this morning someone, or something, slapped my bed, forcefully. I'm at a loss as to why this is happening. I thought we'd left the activity behind in the apartment. But now that it's starting again, I'm terrified. Any recommendations on how to get this to stop, or what kind of spirit would crawl on a bed? 5. Around year 2001, I was surfing the internet before bedtime. I randomly searched my girlfriend's long disappeared but well-loved father by searching his name. Shockingly, an obit turned up. Nobody had heard from him in years. But now I found a most recent obit listing surviving children to confirm it was him. My girlfriend called her mother, shared the news, and had her mom confirm a second time after reading the obit. And then the tears came. From 10 p.m. until 12 midnight she cried. Cried herself to exhaustion, and cried herself to sleep. I did my best to console her, and when I knew she was asleep, I turned the house down to sleep myself. Around 2:30 a.m., I waked to scratching in the wall next to our bed. It sounded exactly like what a mouse might sound like in my imagination. So I dismissed it without thinking twice. Back to sleep. 30 minutes later, it awakes me again, but it's moving into the next wall by the window. I'm still thinking mouse, but I turn on the light and get out of bed and go to the wall. I then get back in bed, and I look down at my girlfriend to see if I awoke her. She's not even stirring, out cold and in a deep, deep sleep. Lights off, and I fall asleep again. About 15 to 20 minutes later, the scratching is now in the far wall, and making enough noise to make hair on the back of my neck oddly stand up for the first time. I turn on the lights and sit up in bed. I turn and again examine my girlfriend. She is not waking up. While I am looking down at her and absorbing the moment, the shelf in our bedroom closet falls apart, crashing loudly about 10 feet away from us. This is behind the closed closet door. My heart slammed into my throat, and I jump out of bed and go straight to the closet, ready for anything. I swing the door open, and there is just a pile of fallen shelf and debris on the floor. The shelf had never fallen before. There was no mouse, no nothing. The scratching had stopped with the crash. It was quiet now. I go back and check on my girlfriend. Just out cold and didn't even stir with all the noise. I walked through our apartment until I was sure everything was secure. After about 20 minutes of lights on, I settled back into bed, wide awake. Just waited for dawn. I took some time and promised out loud to my girlfriend's father that I would look out after her and keep her safe. I was convinced then, as I am today, that he was there with us that night, making his presence known I wasn't afraid as I waited for dawn. In fact, I dozed off again at some point. I felt as if he understood me and he was saying goodbye to his daughter. She had no recollection of anything strange in the morning. It was all very strange, but in the end, peaceful. I am convinced to this day that it was her father. Hey everyone, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to my latest paranormal video. I believe this is episode 10. We are up to... Oh, it's not. Episode 11. Excellent. Well, I don't usually get chills reading these stories. Now and again I do. And I definitely got chills during that third one. But the guy with the name, wanting to tell the girl his name. Oh, that was, yes, there were chills as I was reading that. Kept kind of glancing up. Well. Now, if you have any advice for the people who have shared their stories with us today, you can either leave it in the comments below, or they're probably more likely to see it if you go to the just click on the links in the description there. It'll take you to the original Reddit thread, and you could post your comments there. If you have anything helpful to say, if you have, or even just any sympathy to share, I'm sure it would be appreciated. And with that, I'm going to leave you for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.